Shabbat Shalom. I'm blessed to have Hannah and Ezra with me tonight, my oldest and youngest, as Noah is with Carrie visiting family in Florida. And with them as props tonight, I'll start by talking about them, which is that in our house, there's our morning ritual during the week is that, unfortunately, I can't understand this, although the school district will never listen to me. The older children in our school districts have to wake up early. So Hannah, our middle schooler, gets on the bus at 7:30 something. And Noah and Ezra, our elementary school children, they don't get on the bus until almost 9 o'clock in the morning. Now, why the older child who would prefer to sleep in has to wake up and get on the bus at 7:30, but the younger children who wake up when the sun comes up have to wait until 9 o'clock makes no sense, but that's what we live with. So it's created a bit of a morning ritual for us. Carrie leaves for work by 7:30, which means I'm with the boys for a good 90 minutes. After they get dressed, eat breakfast, pack up their bags, I have about 85 minutes left until they get on the bus. So one of our traditions has become to sit on the couch that looks out our back window and try to see what animals are out in the morning. We're lucky that our backyard has lots of woods, and so we see plenty of birds. We have a bird book that Ezra loves to identify the birds. We have a little stream, so we get ducks and a blue heron occasionally. There's a woodchuck who hobbles along, pops his head up, and then runs away because he's very skittish. Once we saw a coyote that actually came up onto our deck. But one of the animals that's most elusive is also, we have found, the largest. And that is the herd of deer. In the summer, when the trees and bushes are full of leaves, we can mostly make them out. In the winter, when there's a blanket of white snow, you see them immediately, and even if they're not there, you see their footprints, right? Their tracks. So even if the deer are not present, you still know the deer were there last night because you wake up, you look outside in the morning, and you can see where they were. But at times like this, what we call the shoulder seasons, the times between the dramatic seasons when our backyard, like yours, is filled with trees that are still brown and leaves that are still brown on the ground, and there's not a lot of color other than brown. A grown deer can be standing right in front of us, and we don't even see it. We've learned that the only way to see this huge animal, especially when there are 5, 6, 7 of them, is if they flutter their little white tail, and you see this little squirrel-like thing flying through the air, and then you realize it's attached to this large animal. So I want to ask you to hold on to that image for a moment, because I didn't just want to talk about deer, even though Bob would perhaps prefer it. Switching gears, 2 days ago, Professor Deborah Lipstadt was confirmed by the United States Senate to be the very first special envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism. At a time when we are increasingly aware of growing anti-Semitism, this is an historic achievement for our country. Historic because it's a new position that elevates the work of anti-Semitism to that of an ambassador. The United States now approaches anti-Semitism in the same way we approach a foreign country, with the full weight and resources of our State Department. Perhaps more particular for the American Jewish community, we can now add the name of Deborah Lipstadt to the likes of Golda Meir and Ruth Bader Ginsburg as a leading Jewish woman who not only takes her civic duty seriously, but also her commitment to Judaism and the Jewish people seriously. She is an active congregant in her modern Orthodox congregation in Atlanta. She's credited with starting the Jewish Studies Department at Emory University. Her civic and Jewish credentials are strong. But tonight I want to share why we should celebrate Professor Lipstadt beyond the historic nature and beyond the role that she might play in the Jewish history books. So we return to the image of the deer. There is no shortage of organizations or esteemed individuals in the world who have spent their lives studying the Holocaust and anti-Semitism. So too, there's no shortage of civic leaders passionate about addressing prejudice, and particularly anti-Semitism. What makes Dr. Lipstadt unique among all of these very qualified people is that she does not just see anti-Semitism when it comes cloaked in a white robe, carrying a torch down Main Street. She sees anti-Semitism where it is hard to find. Back to my backyard. It's easy to see a deer when the ground is covered with snow. It's easy to see anti-Semitism when it marches down Main Street, when it holds hostages in synagogues, or it shouts, "Jews will not replace us." We all see that anti-Semitism, but what about the times when it's not obvious? It's much harder, almost impossible to see, like a deer in March in Ohio. But Dr. Lipstadt has made a career of seeing it during the hardest times. I would call it her superpower. In fact, it even came up during her confirmation hearing. Dr. Lipstadt was recommended by the president for this position in July. The process was then stalled because, largely, Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson took issue with a tweet by Dr. Lipstadt. The tweet was an article printed about his comments in support of the January 6th Capitol riots. Lipstadt was unequivocal in calling the riots, and by reference, his comments, white supremacy. She was courageous in sharing her expert opinion publicly, and her nomination was held up for almost 8 months, seemingly for this issue alone, as other people were nominated almost by the dozens. But this is not just politics. This is what the front lines of fighting anti-Semitism looks like. To most eyes, the January 6th riots have nothing to do with anti-Semitism. So why would Dr. Lipstadt raise her voice in that moment? This is not her issue. Former white nationalist, now outspoken activist Derek Black said the following: "White nationalists believe that all of their problems with society are created by an organized conspiracy of Jewish people who are motivating and pushing immigration laws, civil rights laws. It is a belief system that in many ways disregards people of color, but sees a secret cabal, a conspiracy by Jewish people, and therefore Jewish people are the main targets of white nationalists." Derek Black knows that because he lived in it, because he was a white nationalist. Dr. Lipstadt called out the January 6th riots and the comments of a U.S. senator because she sees what most of us, including that senator, do not. White supremacy is cloaked in racial terms, but it is the front lines of anti-Semitism. So now we have a special envoy in the State Department who sees anti-Semitism before the rest of us. Sometimes she sees it before us because it's cloaked in racism, but even if we don't see anti-Semitism in the January 6th riots as quickly as she does, it's not like we all approve of them. We don't approve of racism. It's not hard to be against that. Anti-Semitism is even more difficult to see when it comes from the people and groups that we call friends and allies. In my mind, I think of this as white-collar anti-Semitism. Unlike white supremacy, white-collar anti-Semitism often comes from the highly educated, progressive elite. It's common on college campuses, often reported when Jewish students join groups fighting for civil rights, such as the Black Student Alliance, for women's rights groups, or for the LGBTQ pride efforts. In her most recent book, Anti-Semitism Here and Now, Dr. Lipstadt shares a series of emails she had with one of her students. The student writes to her, "Increasingly, we find that at meetings of these progressive groups, irrespective of the agenda of the meeting, opposition to Israeli government policies or to the existence of the State of Israel is almost certain to figure into the conversation. Sometimes," the student says, "it's not what is said about Israel that makes us feel uncomfortable. What alarms us are the assumptions that are made about Jews in general. In discussions about bigotry and prejudice, our attempts to bring anti-Semitism into the conversation are shot down by some faculty and students with the comment that, because Jews are a privileged group, the connections we are trying to make are irrelevant and invalid. They contend that for something to be racist or prejudicial, it has to be composed of both prejudice and power. Lipstadt responds in far more pages than I can share right now that you cannot exclude a group from being attacked simply because they have some power. And she sums up part of her response, a message to all of us, by saying, there is a growing tendency among those who fight anti-Semitism to see it as a problem that exists only on the other side of the political spectrum. Those on the left see Jew hatred only on the right. Those on the right see it only on the left. Both are correct in what they see, but they are blind, or rather willfully blind, to the anti-Semitism that's in their midst. White-collar anti-Semitism, again, my term, is hard to see because it's often dressed up in intellect, in compassion, in concern for the underprivileged. It presumes that privilege makes one immune to prejudice. Lipstadt knows this is not the case. So my metaphor for anti-Semitism is the deer you can't see, the big animal that's right in front of you that perhaps only during a certain moment comes into view. Her metaphor is better. In an interview with NBC, she compared anti-Semitism to the herpes virus. It's a terrible thing, and the truth of the matter is, her words, from what I understand medically, once you have it, you can never be quite free of it. Under pressure at a difficult time, the day before your wedding, perhaps, you could suddenly have an outbreak. You're under pressure. And I think anti-Semitism is like that. It sits in the society, and at pressure times, it can be unleashed. So there's no antidote to anti-Semitism. It can live among the poor. It can be among the ignorant. It can be the focal point of hate-filled people who hate people for the color of their skin and their religion and their country of origin. And it can live among the wealthy and the educated and the peace-loving activist community. Dr. Lipstadt sees that. She writes about it, she talks about it, and now she's been deputized to seek it out wherever it is. She goes even further. If it is near impossible to see a deer in the forest, how about seeing anti-Semitism in a sea of Jews? In her book, she writes about an incident with Natalie Portman. The famous actress was invited to receive an award from the Israeli government. She declined out of her discomfort with Prime Minister Netanyahu and his policies. In response, some Jewish organizations and members of the Knesset attacked Portman, calling her anti-Semitic. Lipstadt refers to this as a shoot-yourself-in-the-foot strategy. If anti-Semitism is to be taken seriously, Israel and the Jewish community cannot point the finger at every criticism we receive. This waters down the definition of anti-Semitism, making it even harder to identify when it really is a threat. For all these reasons, and I'm sure many, many more, in my opinion, Dr. Lipstadt is a wonderful choice to be the special envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism. She has the best eyes for it. She's proven herself to be courageously outspoken, criticizing senators, prime ministers, Jews, even defending those who criticize Israel vehemently but don't cross the line of being anti-Semitic. But I don't speak about her this evening to give her accolades. I speak about her because her appointment, I think, offers a challenge to us. The hope I have is that she is not alone in her vision nor in her voice. We need to be able to see the animal that is anti-Semitism when it is right in front of us, when it comes in a white coat with a pointy hat, and when it's wearing a Black Lives Matter t-shirt or teaching our humanities class. Once we see what is hard to see, then we have to figure out how we react. We know what to do with white nationalism. What do we say to our friends, to our fellow Jews, to those who love Israel blindly, those who associate their hatred of Israeli policy with Jewish privilege? It's not simple. It's not easy. So I'll end with this invitation. At the end of this month, we're beginning an important series that's been almost a year in the making. It is titled Anti-Zionism, Is it Anti-Semitism? Question mark. Begins on April 29th with guest speaker Bel Yoeli from the American Jewish Committee. Ms. Yoeli will frame where anti-Semitism is in America today. It's our community Shabbat, and so her audience will be the entire Jewish Akron community, and we hope you'll join us. Service is at 7 o'clock that night, so you're welcome to come at 6:15. You'll just get the first seats. But Ms. Yoeli will speak with us as a Jewish professional who's well aware, especially of this current generation and the complexities of anti-Semitism, as she's worked for the AJC her entire professional career. She'll talk with us about the realities of anti-Semitism that we are facing and especially our kids are facing. The following week, May 6th, Friday night, we'll welcome Hillel professionals, local leaders, Jennifer Chestnut and Adam Hirsch, along with some students to talk to us about what Jewish life is like on campus, especially when it comes to issues that are often contentious and perhaps anti-Semitic. And finally, on Wednesday, May 25th, one of the great progressive Zionist rabbis, Ami Hirsch, was the rabbi at Stephen Wise Synagogue in New York. He will join us virtually, live, but virtually. It's amazing how close New York and Akron can be when you use a television screen. One of the great thinkers on what it means to be a progressive Jew and a Zionist from an American perspective. We'll have the opportunity on May 25th to have lunch together. Those who want to join us here at Temple are welcome to be here. Those who want to join from home can do that too. As we take these 3 days at the end of the month and in May to start to be able to see anti-Semitism where perhaps we don't, to learn how to respond to anti-Semitism where perhaps we don't have the words, and to see what it is we can do to be a partner with Deborah Lipstadt, a professor who is now in the State Department, to approach anti-Semitism as though it is a country out there in the world that we must deal with. So let us celebrate her confirmation, and let us pledge not to let her do this work alone. Ani va'ata nishaneh et ha'olam. Her, you, me, together, we can change this world for the better.